Just because we can be offended doesn't mean we have to be. Cultivating emotional sovereignty in a reactive culture. In contemporary society, offense has become both a currency and a contagion. Social media platforms amplify outrage. News cycles thrive on indignation, and personal identity is increasingly intertwined with ideological positioning. In such an environment, the mere possibility of being offended is often treated as justification for emotional reactivity. Yet, the capacity to feel offended does not obligate us to live offended. The distinction between stimulus and response, between what happens to us and how we choose to interpret and embody that experience, lies at the heart of psychological maturity, emotional resilience, and personal sovereignty. The statement, just because we can be offended, doesn't mean that we have to be offended, is not a call to emotional suppression or moral indifference. Rather, it reflects a deeper philosophy of self-regulation, discernment, and conscious agency. It invites individuals to reclaim authorship over their internal states, rather than surrendering that authority to external forces. Offense is a psychological reflex. Offense is not merely a moral judgment. It is a psychological reaction shaped by cognition, emotion, identity, and conditioning. From a cognitive perspective, offense arises from appraisal processes, our interpretations of meaning, intent, and threat. When a statement, behavior, or symbol is perceived as violating one's values or identity, the nervous system often responds defensively, activating the stress response. Neuroscientifically, perceived social threat activates the same brain regions associated with physical danger, including the amygdala and anterior cingulate cortex. The body reacts as though under attack, even when the threat is symbolic or ideological. In this sense, offense is not merely an opinion, but rather it is a somatic experience. However, cognitive behavioral research demonstrates that emotional reactions are not caused directly by events, but by our interpretations of those events. Two people can encounter the same stimulus and respond in radically different ways. One becomes enraged, the other remains curious. One feels attacked, the other feels unmoved. The difference lies not in the event, but in the meaning assigned to it. The illusion of emotional obligation, modern culture increasingly frames emotional reactions as moral imperatives. If something is offensive, one is expected to be offended. If one is not offended, one may be accused of apathy, complicity, or ignorance. This creates a form of emotional coercion in which outrage becomes a social requirement rather than a personal choice. Yet emotional autonomy is a cornerstone of psychological well-being. Self-determination theory emphasizes that autonomy, or the ability to regulate one's own internal states and behavior, is essential for mental health and resilience. When individuals surrender their emotional regulation to external narratives, they become psychologically reactive rather than self-directed. Viktor Frankl in 1959 wrote of the extreme conditions of Nazi concentration camps, articulating this principle with profound clarity. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Offense collapses that space. It replaces reflection with reflex. It trades discernment for reaction. Identity, ego, and the architecture of offense. Offense is often less about the external stimulus and more about the internal structure of identity. When beliefs become fused with the ego, disagreement feels like annihilation. When narratives become moral absolutes, questioning feels like betrayal. Social identity theory explains how individuals derive self-concept from group membership, which can intensify defensiveness when group values are challenged. In such contexts, offense becomes a mechanism for protecting identity boundaries. However, psychological flexibility, or the ability to hold beliefs lightly and remain open to new perspectives is strongly associated with well-being and adaptive functioning. Rigid identity structures create fragile egos. Fragile egos seek offense. The Stoic philosophers understood this dynamic long before modern psychology. Epictetus wrote, "It is not things themselves that disturb people, but their judgments about those things." In Taoist philosophy, offense is seen as an expression of imbalance, a disturbance of inner harmony caused by attachment to form, opinion, and self-image. The Tao Te Ching repeatedly emphasizes softness, yielding, and non-contention as expressions of true strength. The cost of chronic offense. Living in a constant state of offense is physiologically and psychologically costly. Chronic emotional reactivity sustains activation of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal HPA axis, elevating cortisol levels and contributing to inflammation, anxiety, cardiovascular strain, and immune dysregulation. Psychologically, habitual offense fosters rumination, polarization, and cognitive rigidity. It narrows perception, reduces empathy, and erodes social cohesion. Over time, it becomes a form of self-imposed imprisonment or learned helplessness, a mental posture of perpetual conflict. From a social perspective, outrage culture rewards emotional escalation rather than thoughtful dialogue. Nuance is punished. Complexity is flattened. The loudest voices dominate, while reflective voices retreat. Yet human flourishing depends not on ideological purity, but on psychological resilience, moral humility, and relational intelligence. Emotional sovereignty and the practice of non-offense. To choose not to be offended is not to abandon values. It is to embody them with maturity. Emotional sovereignty means reclaiming authority over one's internal state. It means recognizing that while we cannot control what others say or do, we can control how we metabolize those experiences. Mindfulness research consistently demonstrates that cultivating present moment awareness reduces emotional reactivity and increases cognitive flexibility. When individuals observe their reactions without immediately identifying with them, the emotional charge dissipates. In Taoist internal cultivation practices, emotional regulation is viewed as an essential aspect of health. Excessive anger is believed to disturb liver qi, excessive fear weakens kidney essence, and excessive rumination burdens the spleen. Emotional moderation is not merely ethical, it is physiological. Similarly, in classical Stoicism, the goal is not emotional numbness, but emotional mastery. One learns to respond rather than react, to act from reason rather than impulse, and to maintain inner stability amid external chaos. We can choose power over fragility. To be easily offended is to live at the mercy of others. To be unoffendable is to live from inner authority. This does not mean tolerating injustice or abandoning moral clarity. It means engaging with the world from a position of grounded strength rather than reactive fragility. It means speaking when speech is necessary, acting when action is required, and walking away when engagement serves no constructive purpose. In a culture addicted to outrage, non-offense is a radical act of. The capacity to feel offended is part of being human. The wisdom to choose not to be offended is part of becoming whole.